Hey guys, it's John Chihak of Anti-Hero Brand Press here again with another top five favorite video. Now, as with all my other top five favorite videos, this video, of course, is going to be my top five as of the recording of this video. And today we're going with wrestling. I've been watching a lot of wrestling this weekend, and particularly NXT and some pay-per-views while watching the WWE Network. And it just made me start rethinking my top five wrestlers. I used to have a top 10 list, but I'd like to keep this a little shorter and sweeter. So first I'm going to go through some honorable mentions. Kurt Angle, phenomenal wrestler, probably one of the pro wrestlers who picked up the game as quickly as anybody possibly could. The only other one who might even come close to that is Brock Lesnar. Although I don't have as much fun watching a Lesnar match. If I just want to watch somebody get squashed or it just turn into an MMA fight, yeah, a Lesnar match is fun. But Brock Lesnar, through the fact that he's never been a regular wrestler. Now, remember, his first WWE run was 2 years. His current WWE run has been since 2012, just after WrestleMania. However, it hasn't been on a weekly or daily basis that Brock has been wrestling, even when he's been champion on a number of occasions. Brock is also not a big favorite of mine just because he has virtually no ability on the microphone. He's got very little charisma, whether he's liked or, whether he's a face or a heel. Kurt Angle kind of is the antithesis of that on the mic because he's almost always been a bad guy. And even when he came back after his neck surgery in '04, and there was going to be the, what was it? It was like the little battle royal that they came back with right after the Royal Rumble, and Benoit had decided to wrestle Triple H. Kurt Angle came out with one of the best promos ever. He came out, the crowd started chanting "You suck" to his music, and he actually told them to stop. He wanted to restart it and have them keep chanting "You suck" while he came out, even though he was a face. And talking about how he was going to be the new champion on SmackDown. And then Show came out and Show cornered him, and Kurt climbs up on the second turnbuckle, so he's eye to eye with Show, and he reaches in his pocket and he pulls out the Listerine breath strips, and he goes, "Show, these are what they call breath strips. See, what you do is you take one of these," and he knocks him out of the hands. And it was just this phenomenal, just exchange between Big Show and Kurt, and Show only had to be angry about it. Kurt had to do all the vocabulary. He can be serious. He can do comedy. I mean, just look at after Triple H got hurt and Austin was, singing Kumbaya to Vince McMahon backstage on the mic, and Kurt shows up and Austin gives him a tiny cowboy hat to wear. And he sold it. That was the beautiful thing about Kurt Angle as the goofy heel. And then he could come out and just be this technical wrestling machine, just throwing suplexes, and he could do stuff off the top rope. A phenomenal worker, and it's really too bad that his career has been cut somewhat short by the different injuries he sustained, predominantly to his neck. The next one on my honorable mention, Randy Savage. When it comes to icons in the WWF in the 1980s, there were two. Hulk Hogan, whom I can do an entire shoot interview promo about why I don't like Hulk Hogan, and Randy Savage. Savage had charisma. He had ability. Sorry about that. Yeah, Savage just had an artistry and an intensity that really worked. In the late 90s in WCW, when he reinvented himself and came back and he was super jacked up, but he could still go, was just an amazing, amazing person to watch. Now, the other two or other three in really, really close succession, Rob Van Dam, 15, 20 years after he began. Like, this guy is still amazing. Sabu, longtime tag team partner of Rob Van Dam, and at one time my favorite wrestler of all time. Just watching him wrestle, and like Brock, didn't do any talking on the microphone, but a phenomenal worker, worked through pain, pulled out some great matches, and wrestled over in Japan, Mexico, like everywhere he wrestled, he could get over. And Taz. A guy who is underrated, maybe overrated in ECW, but at the same time underrated in wrestling as a whole because he's not a very big guy. And of course, his career was cut short because of a series of neck injuries and back injuries. But Taz was a guy who could go, and his promos in ECW, oh man, they were great. I mean, yeah, really profanity laden, and they got in there and stuff like that. But his feud with Sabu from 96 to 97 was phenomenal. It was a thing of beauty. And it's unfortunate that Taz really never got to showcase his abilities in the WWE. So I'm going to go through my top 5 from 5 to 1. And number 5, Pentagon Jr. or Pentagon Dark. I started watching Lucha Underground on Netflix mid last year. Phenomenal hybrid style of lucha libre mixed with like a Japanese strong style, where he's just cutting and chopping people down, and his submissions. Definitely an amazing hybrid of wrestling. I think the other thing I really, really like about Pentagon is also the thing I like about my number 4 on this list is he's not what you traditionally think of as a wrestler. He's not a really big guy. He's not super jacked, but he's extremely believable in the ring. And the Cero Miedo, no fear, zero fear, tagline for him is phenomenal. So I can definitely see Pentagon Dark moving up in the listing, especially considering 2 of these guys are no longer wrestling, one who's passed away. Number 4 on my list, from his time in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla and his time in Ring of Honor and his time in TNA, Samoa Joe, the Samoan submission machine. Longest reigning Ring of Honor world champion at 23 months. Joe is the guy who just looks phenomenal in the ring, even though he doesn't look phenomenal in the ring. Again, another guy who's not jacked and not cut, but can go. He throws suplexes and judo throws, and his chops and his kicks. Oh man, his trilogy with Punk. If you have not seen it, I suggest you go to Ring of Honor Wrestling or ROHWrestling.com. I think you can still get the DVD with the trilogy in it. I picked it up a couple of years ago. The first disc has the 3 matches in it, and then the second disc has a shoot with Joe and Punk talking about building the match. And it's great to watch the evolution of Punk as a wrestler, going from, a top flight indie guy to a guy who was positioned to be one of the successors in Ring of Honor. So, I mean, it was really cool to see that. But Joe is just one of those guys you could watch all day, every day. A phenomenal worker. He's a guy who's really allowed bigger guys like Kevin Steen to shine through. I mean, Steen brings a lot, Kevin Owens brings a lot of the same ferocity as Samoa Joe does to the ring. Owens is not on my list, but definitely a phenomenal worker as well. Which brings number 3, a guy who was also well known during Ring of Honor and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, one time known as the American Dragon, now known as Daniel Bryan, but I like him as Bryan Danielson. from the main event, the three-way main event at the first Ring of Honor, the era of Honor begins, where he did a triangle match with Loki and Christopher Daniels, to his 17-month run as Ring of Honor champion, where he merged the Ring of Honor World title and the Pure title. Um, to starting the soccer style chants of "you're gonna get your fucking head kicked in," and just, he, again, not a guy who looks like he should be able to do the things he does, not because he's not in shape, but because he's 5'7", 5'8". He's not a big guy either, but a phenomenal worker. He's got not just great agility, great strikes. Not phenomenal on the mic, though, but he had an innate charisma that took a little while to take hold in the WWE, to really build upon. But he's kind of one of those underdog stories that, because of his size, and because he's really more of like just a hard worker wrestler, he's not the type of guy who comes out and does flashy dancy stuff, or cuts like a 90-minute long promo or anything like that. He's just a guy who loves the business and works extremely hard. And hopefully one of these days he'll either be cleared by a WWE doctor, or he'll get released so he can go wrestle in Ring of Honor or New Japan, or Zero One, or somewhere in Mexico or Canada, or anywhere in the States would be great, just to see him working again. My number 2 wrestler, the first of whom is no longer wrestling, CM Punk. You see the X's on my hands. Every weekend I draw them on. I decided to take on the label and the dedication of being straight edge last April, actually. And I started doing so a year after I'd gotten sober, and several months after I had quit smoking. And Punk was one of the reasons for that. I just love the way that he works and the way that he wrestles. His promos are phenomenal, top notch. He's only had one match in MMA, and hopefully he's going to get some more chances and kick some ass, or come back to pro wrestling. I mean, he's still relatively young. He's only going to be 40 this year. And his style was such that he could probably do it until he's 45 or 50. And I'm just hoping that he's got an opportunity to come back. And I mean, he's also one of the reasons I got back into wrestling, watching at least current stuff, because I never really lost that. I was just watching mostly ECW and Ring of Honor. But he's also a big comic book fan, written a couple of comics as well. And yeah, if you can check out like a Best of Punk or Summer of Punk from the Ring of Honor set, it's also a phenomenal watch as well. Which brings me to my number 1 on my list, and also a reason I proudly wear X's on my hands for being straight edge, Eddie Guerrero. Eddie was always a phenomenal wrestler from his time in AAA, when he went to Japan, when he wrestled in ECW for a short time and had a string of great matches with Dean Malenko and some tag matches. In fact, he tagged with Taz in '95 against Malenko and Too Cold Scorpio in the match that Taz broke his neck. And after Taz was able to tag out of that match, Eddie wrestled like the next 15 minutes uninterrupted against Scorpio and Malenko, while Taz just laid on the ring apron because his neck was broken. A guy who beat his demons in terms of, substance abuse and drinking, and was able to earn back the respect and love of his family. And just a showman. I mean, he was fun on the mic. He was fun in the weird little vignettes and promos they would do, and definitely deserving of being called a world champion. I wish his run had been a little bit longer, but definitely one of those guys who was underrated until he finally got the belt. But yeah, I mean, just phenomenal work, or 5 stars across the board for Eddie. So take a minute, watch any one of their highlight videos, because it'll definitely make your day. Thanks. This has been John Chihak of Anti-Hero Brand Press. Check out the Patreon at www.patreon.com/antiherobrand. Have a good night.